If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Let's get back to it. The hustle and bustle at JFK International Airport on that September morning was as intense as ever. People rushed from one side to the other, suitcases dragging across the smooth floor, announcements echoing over the loudspeakers in English and Spanish, the smell of coffee from the cafes mixing with the artificial scent of perfume shops. Gabriel Hayes crossed through Terminal 4 with long, determined strides, his Italian leather briefcase under his arm, his navy blue suit impeccable, his gleaming shoes reflecting the artificial lights from the ceiling. He had exactly 22 minutes to get to his gate. The meeting in D.C. couldn't be postponed. Years of negotiations were finally coming to a head that afternoon, and his presence was essential. Gabriel was known in the corporate world of New York City as a pragmatic, focused man, almost cold in his decisions. At 43, he had built an empire in the tech and logistics sector, leading a company that employed over 2,000 people. His routine was planned down to the minute. He woke up at 5:30 a.m., ran 6 miles on the treadmill, drank black coffee with no sugar, and dove into work until nightfall. Weekends were just work days without traffic. His life was an organized sequence of meetings, contracts, trips, and results. But it hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Gabriel smiled more, when life had colors beyond charts and spreadsheets, a time when he woke up to laughter echoing through the house, when weekends were for trips to the park, kites in the sky, ice cream melting in the small hands of the one he loved most. But that was in the past, far in the past, and he preferred not to revisit those dark corners of his memory. Working was easier. Working numbed the pain. As he walked briskly, Gabriel checked his phone for the 10th time. Emails, messages, notifications. His assistant confirmed that everything was ready for the meeting. The car would be waiting for him upon arrival in D.C. Perfect. He put the phone in his pocket and quickened his pace. It was then that something made him stop. It wasn't a specific sound, it wasn't an announcement. It was just a strange feeling, as if something invisible had grabbed his arm and whispered, "Look to your side." Gabriel turned his head. There, sitting on one of the metal benches near a pillar, was a little girl. She must have been 6 or 7, maybe younger. She wore a faded pink dress, too big for her small frame, and a worn-out wool coat that had seen better days. Her feet dangled without touching the floor, clad in scuffed-up flats. Beside her was a small, old suitcase, the fabric kind that looked like it had been traveling for decades, and in her lap, hugged tightly, was a brown teddy bear with one ear slightly crooked. The girl was alone. Gabriel looked around, no adult nearby, no guardian, just the child, motionless, her brown eyes fixed on the floor, her lips pressed together like someone trying not to cry. He felt a strange pang in his chest, a twinge, a memory trying to surface. No, not now. Gabriel picked up his pace, moving away. He had a flight to catch. That girl wasn't his problem. She was probably waiting for someone. Parents in the restroom maybe, or in line at a snack bar. Yes, that was it. He didn't need to get involved. But when he was just a few feet from the gate, Gabriel stopped again. He looked back. The girl was still there, alone, motionless. No one was approaching her. And then he saw it. The teddy bear slipped from her lap and rolled across the floor, stopping right near where Gabriel stood. The girl stood up, startled, her eyes wide, but she didn't run after the toy. She just stood there, trembling slightly. Gabriel picked up the bear. The plush was worn, the fabric rough from time and use, but it still had that smell of childhood, of sleepless nights, of hugs that chase away nightmares. He walked back to the girl and knelt in front of her, holding out the toy. The child took the bear and hugged it tightly, but she didn't look at Gabriel. She kept her eyes down, her hands shaking. "Are you okay?" Gabriel asked, softening his voice. The girl didn't answer. "Where are your parents? Your mum? Your dad?" Still silence. Gabriel looked around once more. No one. The airport's frenzy continued, but here, in this small corner, it was as if time had stood still. "What's your name?" he insisted gently. The girl finally lifted her eyes. They were brown, large, and carried a fear that Gabriel knew well, an old, deep fear, the kind that shouldn't exist in eyes so young. Julia. The voice came out weak, almost inaudible. Julia. That's a pretty name. I'm Gabriel. Are you waiting for someone? She nodded. Who? My aunt. Did your aunt go to the restroom? Did she go to buy something? Julia shook her head. I don't know. She told me to wait here. She said not to leave, that if I was a good girl she'd come back. Gabriel felt his stomach tighten. How long have you been here? The girl shrugged. I don't know. A long time. He looked at his watch. His flight was leaving in 15 minutes. The meeting, the contract, everything he had worked for over the last few months. But when he looked at Julia again, at that scared little face, at the worn-out clothes, at the old suitcase beside her, something inside Gabriel broke. He thought of calls he would never answer again, of hugs he couldn't give, of promises he couldn't keep. He thought about how life can change in a second and how some mistakes can never be undone. No, not this time. I'm going to stay here with you until your aunt comes back, okay? Gabriel said, sitting down next to her. Julia stared at him with suspicion, but also with a glimmer of hope. The minutes passed. Gabriel missed his flight. He sent a quick text to his assistant saying something had come up to reschedule the meeting. The reply came in seconds, full of question marks and concern. Gabriel ignored it. He stayed there next to Julia, watching. The girl didn't talk much. Every now and then, she would clutch the teddy bear to her chest. Her eyes wandered through the terminal, searching for someone who clearly wasn't coming back. That's when Gabriel noticed the details. The girl's fingernails were dirty, bitten. Her light brown hair was tangled, as if it hadn't been combed in days. Her face was pale, her cheeks hollow, and there was something else. Small marks on her arms, old scratches, some recent. What happened here? Gabriel asked gently, pointing to one of the scratches. Julia pulled down the sleeve of her coat, hiding her arm. Nothing. Julia, you can tell me. I'm not going to be mad at you. She was silent for a long time. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, I was bad. Bad how? Julia lowered her head. I made noise. My aunt doesn't like noise. Gabriel felt anger rise, but he controlled it. He kept his voice calm. Do you live with your aunt? I do, since my dad went away. Went away where? Julia shrugged. I don't know. He was sick. One day he left and never came back. Then Aunt Veronica came to live with us. She was my dad's secretary. Now she takes care of me. Takes care of you, Gabriel thought, feeling the bitterness of the words. This didn't look like care. And your mother? Julia shook her head. I never had a mother. My dad said she left when I was born. Gabriel took a deep breath. The girl's story was full of holes, of things unsaid, of hidden pain. He recognized it. He had his own pain locked away in places he preferred not to open. Look, Julia, I think we need to let someone know you're here alone, okay? I'm going to call airport security to help us find your aunt. No! Julia grabbed his arm, desperate. Don't call anyone. If you do, she'll be mad at me. She said I had to wait quietly. If I make a fuss, she won't come back. Gabriel held the girl's small hands. Julia, listen. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. But you can't stay here alone. It's dangerous. Let's call someone who can help, okay? The girl started to cry. Thick tears streamed down her face, and she tried to wipe them away with her hands, desperate not to make any noise. Gabriel's heart ached. Hey, it's okay to cry. You can cry. I'm here. And for the first time in years, Gabriel truly hugged someone. Not a formal handshake, not a polite pat on the back. A hug from someone who understands pain, from someone who has been broken and knows that sometimes all we need is for someone to stay. Julia clung to him like someone clinging to a life raft in the middle of the ocean. Gabriel called security. 2 officers came, a woman and a man, both in uniform. He explained the situation. They checked the cameras. They saw a middle-aged woman, black hair and a bun, elegant clothes, leaving the girl on the bench and walking out of the terminal without looking back. That had been almost 3 hours ago. 3 hours. A 6-year-old child, alone, in a busy airport, for 3 hours. The social worker was called, a woman in her 50s with greying hair and a kind, attentive gaze. She introduced herself as Claudia and spoke to Julia with patience, asking gentle questions. The girl answered little, always in a low voice, always looking down. Claudia checked the suitcase. Inside were a few old clothes, a sketchbook, and an old half-torn photo hidden deep in the lining. Gabriel saw when Claudia found the photo. It was a picture of an elegant, smiling man holding a baby in his arms. On the back, written by hand, "Julia, my treasure. Daddy loves you forever." Claudia put the photo away and turned to Gabriel. "Do you know the child, sir?" "No, I just found her here alone." "And you decided to stay?" "I did." "Why?" Gabriel was silent. He didn't know how to explain it. Or maybe he did, but didn't want to admit it. "Because it was the right thing to do," he finally answered. Claudia nodded. "I'll need to take Julia for an evaluation. We need to locate her legal guardian and understand what happened here. But—" She hesitated, looking at the girl who was still holding Gabriel's hand. "She seems to trust you. Would it be possible for you to stay with us for a few hours? It would make the process easier." Gabriel looked at Julia. Her eyes were fixed on him, pleading. "Don't leave me," they said without words. "Of course. I'll stay as long as it takes." And so Gabriel Hayes, the businessman who had no time for anything but meetings and contracts, spent the rest of that afternoon in a social services office at the airport, sitting next to a little girl he had just met, but who somehow already occupied a place in his heart he thought had been closed forever. Claudia made calls. She tried to locate this Aunt Veronica using the information Julia provided. The address was on file, but when they called, no one answered. They tried contacting neighbors. Nothing. It was as if the woman had simply vanished. Meanwhile, Julia ate a snack Gabriel had bought. A sandwich, some juice, a chocolate bar. She devoured, it all with a hunger that seemed ancient, like someone who hadn't eaten properly in a long time. Gabriel watched in silence, the anger growing inside him. What kind of person abandons a child? What kind of person leaves a little girl alone in an airport and just walks away? Claudia returned with a worried expression. "Mr. Hayes, may I speak with you for a moment? In private?" They left the room, leaving Julia drawing on a piece of paper an employee had given her. "What is it?" Gabriel asked. "The situation is more complex than we thought. We've confirmed that the woman who left Julia here boarded an international flight 2 hours ago. Destination Portugal." "Portugal? Why?" "We don't know, but she used a passport and bought the ticket under a different name. We're investigating, but all signs point to this being premeditated. She planned to abandon the child." Gabriel felt his blood boil. "And now what?" "Now we need to locate other family members. I'm going to contact Child Protective Services and check on Julia's legal status. But, Mr. Hayes, I have to be honest with you. These things can take time. It's Friday afternoon. The agencies are closing. We probably won't get any answers until Monday. And where will Julia stay until then? Normally, she would be taken to a temporary shelter." Gabriel looked at the door to the room, imagining Julia in there, alone, scared. "No." "No? She can stay with me." Claudia raised her eyebrows. "Mr. Hayes, you understand that's irregular? You're a stranger to her." "I am, but I was the only one who stayed, and she trusts me. Look, I know it's not protocol, but this girl has been through enough today. I'm not going to let her be taken to a place full of strangers where she'll be terrified. At least with me she feels safe." Claudia was silent, considering. "I would need your documents, proof of residence, references, and even then, it would be extremely temporary, just until Monday when we can get the proper agencies involved." "No problem. Whatever it takes." And so, completely unexpectedly, Gabriel Hayes left the airport that night with a 6-year-old girl by his side. Julia held his hand tightly, her old suitcase dragging on the floor, the teddy bear under her arm. Gabriel's apartment was on the Upper East Side, in a modern building with mirrored glass and 24-hour security. The apartment was huge, 3 bedrooms, A balcony with a view of the city, minimalist decor in shades of grey and white. Everything was impeccable. Everything was cold. Julia entered slowly, looking around with wide eyes. She had never seen a place like this. So big, so clean, so empty. "You must be tired," Gabriel said. "I'll get the guest room ready for you. It has a big, comfortable bed." Julia didn't answer. She just followed Gabriel down the hallways, always a few steps behind, always alert like a frightened little animal ready to flee. Gabriel showed her the room. He made the bed with clean sheets, put towels in the bathroom, and found a large t-shirt of his for Julia to use as pajamas. "Do you want to take a shower? Eat something?" Julia shook her head. "I just want to sleep." "Okay. If you need anything, just call me. I'll be right down the hall." He left and left the door ajar. He went to the living room, sat on the couch, and buried his face in his hands. What was he doing? He didn't know how to take care of a child. He didn't know what to say, what to do. He had lost that ability a long time ago, or maybe he had never really learned. An hour passed. 2. Gabriel tried to sleep on the couch but couldn't. He got up and went to check on Julia. When he opened the bedroom door, his heart sank. The bed was untouched. Julia wasn't in it. She was lying on the floor, curled up next to her old suitcase, the teddy bear clutched to her chest, sleeping in the fetal position. Gabriel approached slowly. The girl was sleeping restlessly, her lips trembling, murmuring words he couldn't understand. He took a blanket and covered her carefully without waking her. Then he sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and just stayed there, watching over her, protecting her. And for the first time in years, Gabriel Hayes cried. He cried for the losses he carried. He cried for that little girl's pain. He cried because life was unfair, and because sometimes all you can do is stay by the side of someone who is suffering and hold their hand until dawn. Outside, New York City was still awake, noisy, indifferent. But in that room, two wounded souls had found each other, and maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something that could save them both. The night moved on, slow and heavy with silence and unspoken promises. And when the sun rose on the horizon, bringing a new day, Gabriel was still there, sitting on the floor, watching over the sleep of the child that fate had placed in his path. The Saturday dawn in New York City brought with it a grey sky, the kind that promises rain but never delivers. Gabriel woke up with an aching back, still sitting on the floor of the guest room, leaning against the wall. The faint daylight filtered through the curtains, drawing soft stripes on the carpet. He looked at Julia. The girl was still lying next to her old suitcase, wrapped in the blanket he had placed over her during the night. The teddy bear was clutched to her chest, and her brown hair fell messily over her small face. Gabriel stood up slowly, feeling his muscles protest. It had been years since he'd spent a night without proper sleep. He stretched, massaged his neck, and left the room without making a sound. The house was too quiet. The huge apartment, which had always been his sanctuary, now seemed to amplify the loneliness. His footsteps echoed in the hallways, the white walls reflected the cold morning light, and everything screamed emptiness. In the kitchen, Gabriel made coffee. The strong aroma filled the air, bringing a bit of normalcy to a situation that was far from normal. He picked up his phone and saw dozens of messages. His assistant, worried about the cancelled meeting, partners asking what had happened, emails from clients, appointments, pending tasks. Gabriel sighed. This was his world, a world of demands, deadlines, expectations. But for the first time in a long time, none of it seemed important. He replied to only one message to his assistant. Had a personal emergency. Need a few days. Reschedule everything. The reply was quick. Everything okay, boss? Need anything? Gabriel typed, I'm fine, I'll explain later. He put the phone away and looked out the kitchen window. Down below, New York was waking up. Cars began to fill the streets. People walked briskly. The world carried on at its frantic pace. But inside, time seemed to have stopped. That's when he heard a noise from the hallway. Light, hesitant footsteps. Gabriel turned and saw Julia standing at the kitchen entrance, still wearing the huge t-shirt he had given her as pajamas. She held the teddy bear in one hand and rubbed her eyes with the other, trying to shake off sleep. Her hair was even messier, and there was a mark from the blanket on her face. "Good morning," Gabriel said, softening his voice. Julia didn't answer. She just stared at him, her big, frightened eyes looking as if she still wasn't sure where she was. "Did you sleep well?" The girl shook her head slightly. "Sort of. Are you hungry?" A timid nod. Gabriel opened the refrigerator, but reality hit him like a punch. There was nothing in there a child could eat, just diet products, sugar-free yogurts, leftovers from a 3-day-old sushi dinner, a bottle of mineral water. He closed the fridge, embarrassed. "How about we order something? Do you like bagels? Juice?" Julia remained silent, but her eyes lit up a little. Gabriel picked up his phone and placed the order. While they waited, he offered the girl some water. She accepted, drinking slowly, her small hands holding the glass, carefully, as if afraid of breaking it. "Julia," Gabriel began, sitting at the kitchen table and gesturing to the chair beside him, "I need to ask you a few questions, okay? It's not an interrogation. You don't have to be scared. I just want to understand your situation better so I can help you." The girl climbed onto the chair, her feet dangling in the air, far from the floor. "Okay. You said yesterday that you live with your Aunt Veronica." "For how long?" Julia thought. "Since my dad got sick. I think it's been about 2 years. I don't remember exactly. And before that, who took care of you?" "My dad. Just him. We lived in a big, pretty house. It had a garden with flowers, and I used to play there. My dad worked a lot, but he always came home for dinner with me. He called me his princess. He said I was his treasure." Julia's voice cracked at the end, and she lowered her head. Gabriel felt his throat tighten. "And what happened to your dad?" "He got sick. He started getting really tired, sleeping a lot. Then Aunt Veronica came. She was his secretary at the office. She said she would take care of everything, that my dad needed help. At first she was nice, she smiled at me. But after my dad went away, everything changed." "What do you mean, went away?" Julia shrugged, her eyes welling up. "I don't know. One day he was there in his room lying down. The next day he wasn't. Aunt Veronica said he went to a place where there was no more pain. She said he wasn't coming back." Gabriel took a deep breath. The way Julia told it, with that mix of innocence and pain, was heartbreaking. He wanted to ask more, but he knew he had to go slow. The child was already too fragile. "And after your dad went away, how did Aunt Veronica treat you?" Julia was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was so low that Gabriel had to lean in to hear. At first she was still nice, but then she started yelling a lot. She said I was too much trouble, that I ate too much, that I was an annoying kid. She would lock me in my room when she had visitors. She said it was so I wouldn't bother them. Sometimes I'd be in there all day. Without lunch, she would only open the door at night after the people left. Gabriel clenched his fists under the table, trying to control his rage. "Go on, Julia. You can talk." "She tore up my drawings. I liked to draw my dad so I wouldn't forget his face. But she found the drawings and tore them all up. She said I needed to forget the past, that now she was my only family. She also took down all the pictures in the house. All of them. Everything disappeared. And the photo that was in your suitcase, how did you manage to keep it?" Julia wiped away a tear. "Martha, the housekeeper, hid it for me. She was nice. She knew Aunt Veronica was mean. One day she hugged me and told me I had to be strong, that one day someone would help me. She put the photo in the bottom of the suitcase, where Aunt Veronica wouldn't find it." Gabriel made a mental note. Martha. He needed to find this housekeeper. She was a witness. She knew important things. "Julia, do you know why your aunt took you to the airport yesterday?" The girl shook her head. "She just said we were going on a trip, that it was a surprise. She packed my suitcase and took me. But at the airport she got weird. She was pacing back and forth, looking at her phone. Then she sat me on that bench and said, 'Stay here and wait. If you're a good girl and don't move, I'll come back. If you disobey, I'll leave, and you'll be alone forever.' And then she left." Were you scared? A lot. But I thought if I obeyed, she would come back. So I stayed. I stayed for a long time. People walked by, but nobody looked at me. It was like I was invisible. Then the teddy bear fell, and you picked it up. And you stayed. You didn't leave. Julia's voice broke, and she started to cry. Gabriel got up and hugged her, letting the girl release years of accumulated pain. She sobbed, clinging to him, soaking his shirt with tears. And Gabriel just held her, saying nothing, because sometimes there are no words that can fix what is broken. When Julia calmed down, the doorbell rang. It was the breakfast delivery. Gabriel set everything on the table: warm bagels, orange juice, fruit, yogurt. Julia ate slowly, savoring every bite, like someone not used to having enough food. Gabriel watched, his heart aching. How many meals had this child skipped? How many nights had she gone to bed hungry? After breakfast, Gabriel called Claudia, the social worker. She answered on the third ring. "Mr. Hayes, how was your night?" It was quiet. Julia slept. I kept watch. "Claudia, we need to talk. The situation is worse than we thought." "I know. That's why I'm calling. I've found some disturbing information. Can I come by in an hour?" "Yes, I'll be waiting." An hour later, Claudia arrived at the apartment. She carried a folder full of documents and wore a grave expression. Gabriel served coffee, and they sat in the living room, while Julia drew in her room, entertained with colored pencils Gabriel had bought online with express delivery. "So?" Gabriel asked. Claudia opened the folder. "I've investigated everything I could about Veronica Costello, the woman who left Julia at the airport. And things don't add up, Mr. Hayes. A lot of things don't add up." "What do you mean?" "First, I found no official record of any family relationship between Veronica and Julia. None. Julia's birth certificate lists only her father, Henry Moore, as her guardian. The mother is listed as unknown. There are no aunts, uncles, grandparents, nothing. So how did Veronica get custody?" "Exactly, and this is where it gets strange. I managed to access the guardianship records. There's a document signed by Henry Moore, the father, granting temporary guardianship to Veronica Costello in the event of his incapacitation. The document is from 2 years ago, a month before Henry passed away." "So it's legitimate?" "It should be, but I dug deeper. The notary's office where the document was registered was investigated a year ago on suspicion of forging signatures on wills and powers of attorney. 3 employees were indicted, and the notary who signed Julia's guardianship document was one of them." Gabriel felt his blood run cold. "Are you saying the document could be fake?" "I'm saying there's strong evidence to suggest it, but there's more. Henry Moore was a successful businessman. He had an import-export company, with an estate estimated at several $1,000,000. When he died, the entire estate should have gone to Julia, managed by a guardian until she turned 18. But that's not what happened. What happened? Veronica Costello, as the legal guardian, took control of the assets, and over the last 2 years the estate has been liquidated, properties sold, accounts emptied, investments cashed out, all legally under the guardianship, but extremely suspicious. She's stealing the girl's inheritance." "Exactly. And now that she realized the authorities were starting to investigate irregularities, she made the cruelest decision. She got rid of the child. Without Julia, without an heir to question anything, she could disappear with the rest of the money." Gabriel ran a hand over his face. "This is monstrous." "It is. And unfortunately, proving all of this will be difficult. She fled the country using fake documents. She's in Portugal, probably planning to settle there or move on somewhere else. Bringing her back to face justice in the US will be complicated." "And Julia, what happens to her now?" "Officially, she's in the care of the state while we investigate. But, Mr. Hayes, can I be frank? Please. The system is overwhelmed. Julia would be placed in a shelter along with dozens of other children in difficult situations. She has already suffered severe trauma. An environment like that could make everything worse. And considering she has formed a bond with you, and you have the means to provide a stable environment, I would be willing to work towards you becoming her temporary guardian." Gabriel was silent, processing. Temporary guardian. Him who couldn't even take care of himself properly, who had turned his life into a series of meetings to avoid feeling, who had closed his heart because the pain of losing someone he loved was too great. But when he looked down the hall at the door to the room where Julia was drawing, something inside him stirred. "What do I need to do?" Claudia smiled. "We'll need documentation, evaluations, supervised visits, but I'll make it as smooth as I can. You did a rare thing yesterday, Mr. Hayes. You stopped. Most people would have walked right by. But you saw a child in danger and you chose to stay. That says a lot about who you are." Gabriel shook his head. "I'm no hero, Claudia. I just did what anyone should do. But they don't, most people don't, and that's why Julia is here now and not lost somewhere in the dark corners of the system." After Claudia left, Gabriel sat in the living room thinking. His entire life was about to change. Meetings, trips, contracts, everything would have to be rethought. But when Julia appeared in the living room, holding a drawing she had made, his eyes lit up in a way they hadn't in years. "I made this for you," she said shyly, holding out the paper. It was a simple drawing, made with colored pencils. 2 stick figures, one big, one small, holding hands. Above them, a yellow sun. "It's beautiful," Gabriel said, feeling his throat tighten. "Can I keep it?" Julia nodded, smiling for the first time since he had met her. That afternoon, Gabriel called Rick, his best friend and a partner in some of his businesses. Rick was a tech specialist, a genius with computers and networks. If anyone could help track Veronica Costello and uncover the extent of the scheme, it was him. Rick arrived 2 hours later, carrying a laptop and a curious expression. Gabriel explained everything. Rick listened in silence, his eyebrows furrowed. "Leave it to me. I'll track every digital move this woman made. If she used credit, cards, phones, emails, I'll find it. And if there's a bigger scheme, we'll find out who else is involved." "Thanks, Rick." His friend put a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, man. I don't know what happened to you at that airport yesterday, but whatever it was, it changed something in you. You seem more alive." Gabriel smiled sadly. "Maybe I needed a purpose that was bigger than spreadsheets and contracts." "Maybe we all do." While Rick worked on his laptop, Julia approached timidly. Gabriel introduced them, and Rick, sensing the girl's fragility, was gentle and playful, managing to get a few smiles out of her. Night came again. Gabriel prepared a simple dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, something even he could make without messing it up. Julia ate everything, cleaning her plate, and then asked to take a shower. Gabriel set out some of his clean clothes for her to wear, making a mental note that he needed to buy proper clothes for a child. When Julia came out of the shower, her wet hair falling over her shoulders, Gabriel asked, "Want me to help you dry your hair?" She nodded. Gabriel got a towel and a hairdryer, and with care, patience, and a bit of clumsiness, he dried the girl's hair. It was strange doing something so simple, so common, but that he hadn't done in so long. And at the same time, it was comforting, as if a part of him that had been dormant was starting to wake up. Julia looked at him in the mirror's reflection. "You're nice." "You are too." "Why did you stay with me yesterday? At the airport? You didn't have to." Gabriel paused for a moment, thinking about the answer. "I stayed because when I saw you there, alone and scared, I remembered how bad it feels to be alone. And I thought that if someone I loved was in that situation, I would want someone to stop and stay. So that's what I did." Julia turned to face him. "Did you lose someone you loved?" Gabriel felt his heart ache, but this time he didn't run from the question. "I did, a long time ago, but I don't like to talk about it." "It's okay. I don't like to talk about my dad either. It hurts too much." "Yeah, it hurts a lot." They were silent for a moment, 2 wounded hearts sharing a pain that needed no words. That night, Julia agreed to sleep in the bed. Gabriel sat beside her, reading a book in a low voice until she fell asleep. When he finally left the room, he found Rick still in the living room, typing furiously. "Find anything?" Rick looked up, his eyes grave. "I did. And it's worse than we thought. Veronica isn't working alone. There are money transfers from Henry Moore's account to at least 3 other people over the last 2 years. One of them is an accountant, another is a lawyer." It looks like an organized network. A network for what? Forging documents, embezzling inheritances. Julia might not be the only victim, Gabriel. There could be other kids in the same situation. Gabriel felt the anger rise, hot and uncontrollable. We have to stop this. We have to expose these people. We will. But we have to be careful. People like this are dangerous. If they find out we're investigating, they could make the evidence disappear. So what do? We keep digging quietly until we have enough evidence to bury them all. And just like that, without realizing, Gabriel Hayes had entered a dangerous game. A game where the opponents had no scruples, where the prize was justice for an innocent girl, and where defeat meant letting cruel people continue to destroy lives. But for the first time in years, Gabriel had something to fight for that wasn't money or success. He had a purpose. And he had a reason to wake up in the morning that went beyond himself. Julia had entered his life like an unexpected storm, and now, together, they would face whatever came next. Because sometimes life puts us exactly where we need to be, next to the person we need to protect. And that, Gabriel was beginning to understand, was the true meaning of family. The week that followed was a roller coaster of emotions and discoveries. Gabriel had to completely reorganize his routine. Meetings were drastically reduced, trips cancelled, appointments postponed. His partners didn't understand what was happening, but they were respectful. Rick, who knew the full story, helped cover his absences and keep the business running. Julia slowly began to adapt. She still woke up scared during the night, calling for her father, crying softly so as not to bother anyone. Gabriel would always go to her, turn on the lamp, sit on the edge of the bed and hold her hand until she fell back asleep. On those nights, he would stay there, watching that peaceful little face in her sleep, and wonder how anyone could have been so cruel to such a fragile child. During the day, Gabriel discovered a world he had forgotten, buying children's clothes in a store full of colors and patterns, choosing toys and seeing Julia's eyes light up with joy, preparing simple meals and sitting at the table to talk about their day. They were small, everyday things, but they filled the void that had dominated his apartment for years. Julia was still shy and cautious. She asked permission for everything, to eat, to drink water, to go to the bathroom, to turn on the television. Gabriel constantly had to remind her that she didn't need permission for basic needs, that this was her home too, that she was safe here. On Tuesday, Claudia returned to the apartment accompanied by a child psychologist named Dr. Beatrice Miller. She was a young woman in her early 30s with curly hair tied in a bun, colorful glasses and a gentle smile. She spoke with Julia alone for over an hour. When she came out of the room, her expression was serious. In the living room, out of Julia's earshot, Beatrice explained, "The child shows clear signs of severe emotional trauma. She was subjected to prolonged isolation, emotional deprivation, and possibly nutritional neglect. Julia has developed defense mechanisms typical of children living in hostile environments. She blames herself for everything, thinks she needs to be perfect to be loved, and has a constant fear of being abandoned again." Gabriel felt his chest tighten. "Will she recover?" Beatrice nodded. "With proper treatment, a supportive environment, and a lot of love, yes. Children are resilient, Mr. Hayes, but the process will be long. She'll need regular psychological support, patience, and above all, consistency. Julia needs to learn that the world isn't always a dangerous place, that there are trustworthy people, and that she deserves to be loved unconditionally. I'll do whatever it takes. I know you will, and I can see you're already doing it. The way Julia talks about you, the sparkle in her eyes when she says your name, you can't buy that. She's starting to trust, and that's a huge step." That same week, Rick made some disturbing discoveries. He was sitting in Gabriel's apartment, his laptop open on the dining table, files scattered, complex charts on the screen. Gabriel was making coffee while Julia drew in her room. "Gabriel, you need to see this," Rick called, his voice tense. Gabriel walked over. "What did you find?" Rick turned the screen. "I managed to track Veronica Costello's financial movements. Over the last 2 years, she transferred over $1 million from Henry Moore's account to overseas accounts. But here's the problem. She didn't act alone. Look at these names. On the screen was a list of bank transactions. Gabriel focused on the names: Albert Foster, accountant; Maurice Drummond, lawyer; Sylvia Costa, a notary's office employee. Rick continued. Albert Foster was Henry Moore's accountant. After his death, he took over the financial management of the estate under Veronica's supervision. Maurice Drummond was the one who drafted the guardianship document. And Sylvia Costa works at the same notary's office that's under investigation for fraud. So they're all in on it. Exactly. And there's more. I found records of at least 4 other children who went through similar guardianship processes in the last 3 years. All with deceased parents, all with considerable estates, all with guardianships granted to people with no real family ties. And in every case, Maurice Drummond was involved in the paperwork. Gabriel felt his anger boiling. This is a systematic scheme. It is. They target vulnerable orphan children with inheritances. They forge guardianship documents, take control of the assets, empty the accounts, and then get rid of the children. It's a business for them, Gabriel, a disgusting business. We need to take this to the police. Rick hesitated. I already tried. I went to the station yesterday. I presented some of the evidence I found. You know what they told me? That it required a formal investigation, that they couldn't act on illegally obtained data, that I could be violating privacy laws. They sent me away. Gabriel slammed his fist on the table, making the papers jump. Are they protecting these criminals? I don't know if it's protection or just bureaucracy, but the result is the same. Nothing happens. And in the meantime, Veronica is in Portugal, probably getting ready to disappear for good. Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. There has to be a way. We can't let these people get away with this. Rick closed his laptop. I'll keep investigating. The more concrete proof we have, the harder it will be for them to ignore. But Gabriel, you need to be careful. These people won't like being exposed. If they find out we're investigating, they might react. React how? I don't know, but people who steal millions using orphan children as tools aren't exactly known for their scruples. Gabriel knew Rick was right, but the thought of backing down, of leaving Julia and other children without justice, was unbearable. 2 days. Later, on Thursday, something strange happened. Gabriel was taking Julia to her first appointment with Beatrice when he noticed a black car parked across from his building. Nothing unusual at first. But when they left the parking garage, the car started following them. Gabriel changed lanes, the car changed too. He sped up, the car sped up. He turned onto a side street. The car turned too. Gabriel's heart pounded. He looked in the rear-view mirror. Tinted windows. Impossible to see who was inside. He thought about flooring it, but Julia was in the back seat. He couldn't risk it. Everything okay back there, Princess? He asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Yeah, why are we going so fast? Just in a hurry. Don't worry. Gabriel grabbed his phone and called Rick. The black car continued to follow them for 2 more blocks, then suddenly turned and disappeared down a cross street. Gabriel breathed a sigh of relief, but the warning had been sent. Someone knew he was investigating. When they arrived at Beatrice's office, Gabriel was tense. The psychologist noticed immediately. Did something happen? Gabriel waited for Julia to go into the playroom before telling her. Beatrice frowned. Mr. Hayes, this is concerning. If people are following you, they might be trying to intimidate you. You should file a police report. I will, but I'm afraid it will make things worse. And you're also afraid they won't do anything, aren't you? Gabriel nodded. The system seems to be against us. Beatrice sighed. Unfortunately, cases of corruption involving guardianships and inheritances are more common than we imagine. There are powerful interests at play, and often the authorities are unprepared or reluctant to act. But don't give up, Mr. Hayes. Julia needs you to be strong and determined. I won't. Give up. And he didn't. But the next few days brought new challenges. On Friday night, Gabriel received a call from an unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello? The voice on the other end was male, deep, calculating. Mr. Hayes, it would be wise of you to stop meddling in affairs that don't concern you. Who is this? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're putting yourself and the child in danger. Leave things as they are. Forget what you think you've discovered, and everyone will be fine. Gabriel felt his anger rise. "You think you can intimidate me? I'm going to see this through. I'll expose every single one of you." Laughter on the other end. "Go ahead then, but remember, you have a lot to lose. Your reputation, your businesses, your freedom. Think carefully about what you're doing." The line went dead. Gabriel stood there, phone in hand, his heart pounding. The threat was clear. But backing down now meant abandoning Julia, abandoning all the other children who had been victims of this scheme, and he couldn't do that. On Saturday morning, while having breakfast with Julia, Gabriel got a text from Rick. "Turn on the news." Gabriel turned on the television. What he saw made his blood run cold. On the screen, a reporter was speaking in front of his company's building. "Businessman under investigation for suspected irregularities in child custody. Gabriel Hayes, CEO of Novolog Technologies, is under investigation after assuming temporary guardianship of a child with no legal kinship. Authorities are questioning the motives and legality of the situation. There are suspicions that Hayes may be using the child for his own benefit." Gabriel felt the floor drop out from under him. It wasn't true. None of it was true. But the media was, destroying his reputation, and he knew exactly who was behind it. He called Claudia immediately. She had already seen the report. "Mr. Hayes, this is a coordinated attack. Someone leaked distorted information to the press. We need to act fast. I'm preparing an official statement explaining the real situation." But the damage was already done. Throughout the day, Gabriel received dozens of calls, worried clients, partners demanding explanations, business associates pulling away. His professional life was crumbling. And then came the final blow. On Monday morning, 2 court officers rang his doorbell. Gabriel answered, his stomach in knots. "Gabriel Hayes?" "Yes." "You are being served with a court summons. A lawsuit has been filed challenging the legality of your temporary guardianship of the minor, Julia Moore. A hearing has been scheduled for 3 days from now. You are required to appear with your lawyer and all relevant documentation." Gabriel took the papers, his hands shaking. "Who filed the suit?" The officer consulted the documents. "Attorney Maurice Drummond, representing the interests of the legal guardian, Veronica Costello." Gabriel felt bile rise in his throat. They were using the law against him, using the system itself to protect the criminals. When the officers left, Gabriel sat on the couch, his head in his hands. Julia appeared, frightened. What was that? Who were those people? Gabriel took a deep breath, trying to control himself. "Nothing for you to worry about, Princess. Just some boring adult paperwork." But Julia wasn't stupid. She saw the desperation in his eyes. "Are you scared?" Gabriel looked at her, those big, trusting, hopeful eyes. He couldn't lie. "I am. I'm scared of losing you." Julia came over and hugged Gabriel. "You won't. You promised you would stay with me, and I believe you." Those words, spoken with such sincerity by a child who had been betrayed so many times, broke something inside Gabriel. He hugged Julia back, tightly, as if he wanted to protect her from all the evil in the world. "I promise I'll fight, Julia. I'll fight to the end." "I know." That afternoon, Gabriel hired the best lawyer he knew. Helen Carter was a woman in her 50s, a specialist in family law, known for her tenacity and for never backing down from an injustice. When Gabriel explained the situation, she was outraged. "This is a setup, Mr. Hayes. They're using the law to silence you. But they won't succeed. We will prove that Julia was in real danger, that Veronica's guardianship is fraudulent, and that you are the best option for the child's well-being." "Do you think we can win?" Helen smiled confidently. "We'll give it our best shot, and I have a pretty good track record." Meanwhile, Rick kept digging, and on Tuesday night he called Gabriel, his voice excited. "Gabriel, I found something big. I got access to Maurice Drummond's emails. He was careless, didn't encrypt them properly, and there are incriminating messages. He and Veronica planned everything, from forging the documents to abandoning Julia at the airport. It's all there. This is incredible. Can we use this at the hearing?" "We can. But there's a problem. The way I got these emails could be legally challenged. We need to find a way to present the information without revealing how we got it." Helen, upon hearing about the evidence, had an idea. "We can make an anonymous tip to the DA's office. If they open an official investigation and find the same evidence, they can use it legally. And so they did. The tip was made, but the hearing was the next day, and there wasn't enough time for a formal investigation to move forward. The night before the hearing, Gabriel couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling, thinking of everything that could go wrong. If he lost custody of Julia, where would she go? Back into the system? To some shelter where no one knew her, where she would be just another number? He got up and went to her room. Julia was sleeping peacefully, her teddy bear clutched to her chest. Gabriel sat on the edge of the bed and held her small hand. "I'm not going to let them hurt you again," he whispered. "I promise." As if she heard him, even in her sleep, Julia squeezed his hand back. On the morning of the hearing, Gabriel put on his best suit. Helen was confident, but realistic. "We'll present all the facts, all the evidence we have. The judge is known for being fair. We have a chance." "And Julia?" "Claudia will stay with her at the courthouse in a special waiting room. It's better if she doesn't witness the proceedings." Gabriel agreed, though he knew Julia was scared. Before leaving, he knelt in front of her. "I'm going to fix this, okay? And when I get back, we're going to celebrate. Deal?" Julia hugged him tightly. "I trust you." The courthouse was crowded. Gabriel entered the courtroom, Helen by his side. On the other side sat Maurice Drummond, a man in his early 50s, impeccable suit, arrogant expression. Next to him was a woman Gabriel assumed was the representative from the DA's office. The judge, Frank Miller, a man in his 60s with graying hair and a serious gaze, opened the session. "We are here to evaluate the situation of the minor, Julia Moore, and decide on temporary guardianship. Mr. Drummond, you may begin." Maurice stood up, confident. "Your Honor, we are here because a child was illegally removed from the care of her legal guardian, Veronica Costello. Mr. Gabriel Hayes, without any family ties or authorization, took custody of the girl, claiming abandonment. However, our client simply left the airport momentarily to handle an urgent matter, and when she returned, the child had been taken by Mr. Hayes." Helen stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. That version of events is completely distorted. We have airport security footage showing Ms. Veronica Costello boarding an international flight, leaving the child alone for over 3 hours." The judge raised a hand. "I will review all the evidence. Both sides will have the opportunity to present their case. Proceed." What followed was an intense legal battle. Helen presented the recordings, the testimony of airport employees, Julia's psychological evaluation showing severe trauma. Maurice counter-argued, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that Veronica had legitimate reasons, that Gabriel was an opportunist. That's when Helen played her final card. "Your Honor, we would like to present documents that question the very legitimacy of Veronica Costello's guardianship over Julia Moore." Maurice turned pale. "Objection! These documents were not presented in discovery." The judge considered. "I'll allow it. Present the documents." Helen handed over copies of the notary's office investigation, the suspicious bank transactions, everything Rick had discovered. The judge read in silence, his expression growing more and more grave. "These are extremely concerning facts. I am temporarily suspending Veronica Costello's guardianship until a full investigation is conducted. As for the custody of Julia Moore, considering the psychological report attesting to the child's bond with Mr. Hayes and the lack of suitable alternatives at this time, I am maintaining temporary guardianship with Mr. Gabriel Hayes under the supervision of social services." Gabriel felt his legs go weak with relief. Helen smiled, victorious, but the judge wasn't finished. "However, Mr. Hayes, this is a serious responsibility. Any irregularity, and this situation will be immediately reviewed. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, Your Honor." Maurice stormed out of the room, shoving papers into his briefcase. Gabriel knew this wasn't over. It had just begun. But at least for now, Julia was safe. When he returned to the waiting room and saw Julia running towards him, her arms open, Gabriel felt he had done the right thing. He hugged the girl, lifting her off the ground, and for the first time in a long time he felt his life had a real purpose. "We did it, Princess. You're staying with me. Forever." Gabriel looked into her eyes. "As long as I can fight for it, yes. Forever." The victory at the hearing brought relief, but Gabriel knew the war was far from over. Maurice Drummond wasn't the type to accept defeat easily, and in the following days it became clear that he and his associates wouldn't give up so easily. In the week after the hearing, strange things started to happen. Gabriel's bank account was temporarily frozen by a suspicious court order, alleging tax irregularities he knew didn't exist. Fake wrongful termination lawsuits were filed against his company by employees he had never hired. Suppliers began cancelling contracts without explanation. It was a coordinated, meticulous attack, designed to destroy him financially and isolate him socially. Rick worked day and night, trying to trace the origin of the attacks and gather more evidence against Drummond's network. Helen Carter filed counter-lawsuits, defending Gabriel on all fronts. But it was like fighting shadows. For every lawsuit they defeated, two new ones appeared. Julia sensed the tension. She saw Gabriel spending entire nights in his office, his face marked with worry, his shoulders burdened by an invisible weight. One night, she quietly entered his office, her teddy bear under her arm. "You're sad," she said, not as a question but as a statement. Gabriel turned, trying to hide his exhaustion. "No, Princess. I'm just tired." Julia came closer and placed her small hand on his. "I know there are bad people trying to hurt you. It's because of me, isn't it?" Gabriel's heart ached. "No, none of this is your fault. Bad people do bad things because they choose to, not because of you. But if I wasn't here, you wouldn't have these problems." Gabriel pulled Julia onto his lap. "Listen to me very carefully. You are the best thing that has happened to my life in a very, very long time. Before I found you, I was lost. I worked non-stop so I wouldn't have to feel, so I wouldn't have to remember. But you made me remember that life can be more than just surviving. You made me want to live again. So don't you dare say this is your fault. You saved me just as much as I saved you." Julia hugged Gabriel, and they stayed like that for a long time, two wounded hearts finding strength in each other. It was the following Thursday that everything changed. Rick showed up at the apartment with an expression Gabriel couldn't decipher. It was a mix of excitement and urgency. "Gabriel, you need to see this, now!" They locked themselves in the office while Julia watched cartoons in the living room. Rick opened his laptop and showed a series of documents. "I got something big, really big. Remember, I was tracking the financial transactions of Drummond and Veronica. Well, I found the source. They weren't just siphoning money from the inheritances, they were laundering it through a fake charity." Gabriel leaned in to get a better look. "What do you mean?" Rick clicked on a few files. They created a fake non-profit organization called the Children's Hope Institute. On paper, it was an institution that helped orphaned children. In reality, it was a front to move illicit money. They used the children as a cover, forged donation documents, and transferred the embezzled funds from the inheritances to overseas accounts through this organization. Gabriel felt sick. They were using vulnerable children as tools for their crimes. Exactly, and there's more. I managed to locate the physical address of this fake institution. It's an abandoned industrial warehouse in Queens, but records show there was activity there until last week. Document movements, meetings. I think they're still using the place. We have to tell the police." "I already did. But Gabriel, you know how it is. Bureaucracy, procedures. It could take weeks for them to get a search warrant. And in that time, they'll clean everything out." "So, what do we do?" Ricky hesitated. "I know where the warehouse is. We could go there just to see. If we find something concrete, we take pictures, document it, and then the police won't be able to ignore it." Gabriel thought about it. It was risky, but the idea of standing by while those people continued to destroy lives was unbearable. "Let's go." They left Julia with Claudia, making up an excuse about a business meeting. The social worker sensed there was more to it, but trusted Gabriel. "Just be careful," she said as they left. The warehouse was in a decaying industrial area of Queens, between closed factories and empty lots. It was late afternoon when Gabriel and Rick arrived. The sky was heavy, threatening rain, and the dim light gave the place an even more sinister look. The warehouse had a faded sign, Children's Hope Institute. The windows were dirty, some broken. A padlock secured the main gate, but it looked old. "Are you sure about this?" Gabriel asked. Rick nodded. "We'll just take a quick look. If there's anything important, we'll photograph it and leave." They managed to break the padlock with some effort. They entered cautiously. The interior was vast, poorly, lit by the light filtering through the dirty windows. There were stacked tables, cardboard boxes, rusted metal file cabinets. Dust covered everything, but it was clear the place had been used recently. Footprints on the floor, recent papers on some tables. Rick started taking pictures of everything. Gabriel opened one of the file cabinets. Inside were folders with children's names, guardianship documents, bank transfers, certificates. Julia's name was there. But there were other names, many others. "This is enough evidence to bring them down," Gabriel said, photographing page after page. That's when they heard the sound of cars pulling up, outside. Gabriel and Rick looked at each other, panic rising. They ran to a side window and saw 2 black cars stopping in front of the warehouse. 4 men got out, all in dark suits, and among them was Maurice Drummond. "We need to get out, now," Rick whispered. But it was too late. The main door burst open. Drummond entered, accompanied by the other men. Gabriel and Rick hid behind a stack of boxes, holding their breath. "I'm sure I locked that door," one of the men said. Drummond looked around, suspicious. "Someone's been here, search everywhere." The men began to spread out through the warehouse. Gabriel and Rick knew it was only a matter of time before they were found. Gabriel looked around, searching for an exit. There was a door in the back, partially hidden by stacked boxes. Slowly, making as little noise as possible, they began to move towards the door. They were almost there when Rick tripped over a can, which rolled noisily across the floor. "There!" one of the men shouted. Gabriel pulled Rick, and they ran for the back door, breaking it open. They emerged into a narrow alley filled with trash and debris. They were running when they heard shouts behind them. "Get them! They can't get away!" Gabriel and Rick ran like they never had before, adrenaline pumping, hearts racing. They crossed the alley, jumped a low wall, and entered another abandoned lot. Behind them, the footsteps of the men echoed, getting closer. That's when Gabriel saw a hole in the side fence. He pushed Rick through, then squeezed through himself. They fell onto a parallel street, just in time to see a bus stopping at a bus stop. They ran and jumped on, breathless as the bus pulled away. Through the back window, they saw the men emerging from the lot, looking around frantically, but the bus was already too far away. Rick leaned over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. That was way too close. Gabriel was still clutching his phone tightly. "The pictures, we got the pictures." And they had. Hundreds of images of incriminating documents, irrefutable proof of the scheme. When they arrived safely back at Gabriel's apartment and confirmed the photos were saved to the cloud, Rick smiled, exhausted. "We got them, Gabriel, we got all of them." The next morning, Rick gave all the material to Helen Carter, who immediately presented it to the DA's office. This time, the evidence was so solid, so concrete, that there was no way to ignore it. The prosecutor in charge, DA August Mendez, was shocked by the extent of the scheme. "This is much bigger than we imagined. We're moving on this immediately." And they did. That same afternoon, a police operation was launched. Officers raided the fake institute's warehouse, seizing documents, computers, and safes full of cash. Maurice Drummond was arrested trying to destroy evidence. Albert Foster, the accountant, was found in his office, surrounded by papers proving the illicit transactions. Sylvia Costa was located trying to leave the city. The operation was all over the news. Multi-million-dollar scheme embezzling children's inheritances dismantled in New York. The headlines covered the front pages, showing photos of the suspects being led away by police. Gabriel watched the news with Julia by his side. The girl didn't fully understand what was happening, but she sensed that something important had changed. "Is it over now?" she asked. Gabriel hugged her. "It's over now, Princess. The bad people are going to pay for what they did." "And Veronica? Is she coming back?" "She's not. She can't hurt you anymore." And it was true. With the evidence gathered, an extradition request was sent to Portugal. Veronica Costello was located and extradited back to the US 2 months later. She faced trial and was found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and child abandonment. She received a long sentence. Maurice Drummond and the others involved were also tried and convicted. But for Gabriel and Julia, legal justice was only part of the healing. The real transformation happened in the months and years that followed. With the legal process resolved, Gabriel was finally able to officially adopt Julia. The adoption hearing was simple, intimate but deeply emotional. When the judge declared that Julia was officially Gabriel's daughter, the girl cried. Gabriel cried. Claudia, who was present, cried. They were tears of joy of a new beginning, of a family born not of blood but of love. Julia started school, made friends, and learned to smile without fear. The therapy sessions with Dr. Beatrice continued, and gradually the nightmares became less frequent. She still had difficult days, moments when the past came rushing back, but Gabriel was always there, holding her hand, reminding her that she was safe, that she was loved. Gabriel changed too. He drastically reduced his workload, delegated more responsibilities, and began to prioritize quality time with Julia. He discovered the joy of going to school meetings, helping with homework, and making breakfast on slow Sunday mornings. His home, once cold and empty, filled with laughter, drawings taped to the refrigerator, and toys scattered across the living room. And he wouldn't trade any of it for all the professional success in the world. But there was something else Gabriel wanted to do, something born from that traumatic yet transformative experience. A year after the adoption, Gabriel created the Fresh Start Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping children who were victims of abandonment, abuse, and neglect. The foundation offered psychological, legal, and social support for children and families in vulnerable situations. Gabriel invested a significant portion of his personal fortune in the project, and Rick joined him, using his tech skills to create systems that tracked irregularities in guardianship cases, helping to prevent other cases like Julia's from happening. Helen Carter became the foundation's legal director, working tirelessly to give a voice to children the system had forgotten. Claudia and Dr. Beatrice also joined, forming a dedicated and passionate team. The foundation grew quickly. In 3 years, it had already helped hundreds of children. Success stories began to emerge. Children who had been rescued from terrible situations, who found loving homes, who began to heal. Julia grew up in this environment of compassion and purpose. She saw Gabriel dedicate himself daily to helping other children like her, and it profoundly shaped who she would become. When she was 12, Julia became interested in medicine. She wanted to understand how to heal not just the body, but also the soul. Gabriel supported her unconditionally, buying her books, encouraging her questions, and taking her to meet doctors and psychologists. As a teenager, Julia became a volunteer at the foundation. She helped other children, shared her story when she felt comfortable, and offered the same kind of hug she had received years before. It was as if she was giving back to the world the compassion that had saved her life. At 18, Julia was accepted into medical school. It was a day of immense pride for Gabriel. Seeing her there, strong, confident, full of dreams, was proof that love could truly transform lives. During medical school, Julia specialized in pediatrics with a focus on childhood trauma. She wanted to work specifically with children who had suffered abuse, neglect, and abandonment. She wanted to use her own experience to help other children find their way back to life. Gabriel grew older, following every step of this journey. His hair turned grey, wrinkles marked his face, but his eyes shone with a joy he hadn't felt in decades. The pain of his past losses never completely disappeared, but it was softened by the love he and Julia built together. When Julia graduated from medical school, Gabriel was in the front row of the ceremony. When she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, he cried openly. The scared little girl he had found in an airport years ago was now a strong, determined, compassionate woman. And he had the privilege of having walked beside her through that entire transformation. Julia began working at a public hospital specializing in pediatrics, but she also dedicated time to the Fresh Start Foundation, treating children who were victims of trauma. She had a special gift. She could connect with frightened children in a way few others could. Perhaps because she knew exactly what it was like to be in that dark place, and she knew how to find the light. The years passed. The Fresh Start Foundation expanded to other cities across the country. Thousands of children were helped. Families were rebuilt. Lives were saved. Gabriel, now in his early 60s, began to gradually step back from managing the foundation, passing more responsibilities to the young, dedicated team he had built. But he never stopped completely. There was always a meeting to attend, a child to meet, a story to hear. One autumn afternoon, Gabriel and Julia were sitting on the apartment balcony, drinking coffee and looking out over New York City below. Julia was now 30, a respected doctor loved by her patients. "You know something, Dad," Julia said, using the word it had taken her years to feel comfortable saying. "Sometimes I think about the day you found me at that airport, and I wonder what would have happened if you had just kept walking." Gabriel looked at her. "But I didn't. And you know why? Because someone up there knew that we both needed each other. You needed someone to save you, and I needed someone to remind me why life was worth living." Julia held his hand. "You gave me a life, Dad, a real life, and now I try to do the same for other kids. I try to be for them what you were for me. Someone who stops and stays. Someone who doesn't give up. And you do. Every single day you do." They sat in silence, appreciating the peaceful moment. Two lives that had found each other at the right time, that had saved each other, that had built something beautiful out of so much pain. Later that year, Gabriel began to feel a weariness that wouldn't go away. He had some tests done and discovered that his heart, which had carried so much throughout his life, was weak. The doctors were honest. There was still time, but not much. Gabriel faced the news with a serenity that surprised even himself. He wasn't afraid. He had lived a full life, had loved deeply, had made a difference in the world. And most importantly, he had Julia. Not the scared little girl from the airport, but the strong, compassionate woman she had become. In the months that followed, Gabriel got his affairs in order. He ensured the Fresh Start Foundation would have the resources to continue its work for many years. He wrote letters to the people he loved. He spent quality time with Julia, sharing memories, laughter, and sometimes silent tears. One night, sitting together as they had since Julia was a child, Gabriel said, "Don't be afraid when I'm gone. You're strong, you're incredible, and you're going to keep making a difference in the lives of so many children. I'll go with pride in my heart knowing you'll be okay." Julia cried, but she nodded. "You taught me everything, Dad. You taught me that love can heal, that compassion can change lives, that it's worth fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. I'll carry that with me forever." When Gabriel passed, it was peacefully, surrounded by the love of Julia and the people he had touched over the years. The funeral was simple as he had requested, but the church was full. Children he had helped, now adults with their own families, professionals from the foundation, friends, all there to honor a man who had dedicated the second half of his life to making the world a little better. Julia gave the eulogy. With a voice thick with emotion but steady, she said, "My father wasn't perfect. He had his pain, his flaws, his fears. But he had something rare. He had the courage to stop. In a world where everyone is rushing, he saw a scared child and chose to stay. And that choice changed everything. It changed my life. It changed his life. And through the foundation he created, it changed the lives of thousands of other children. Today I say goodbye to the man who was my hero, my father, my best friend, but I don't say goodbye to his legacy. That I will carry forward. I will keep stopping for those in need. I will keep staying when everyone else leaves, because that's what he taught me, and it's the greatest lesson anyone can learn." In the years that followed, Julia kept her promise. The Fresh Start Foundation continued to grow under new leadership, but with Gabriel's spirit always present. Julia became a national authority on childhood trauma, giving lectures, teaching, and inspiring a new generation of professionals. She also began traveling across the country, bringing medical care and psychological support to remote communities where children suffered in silence. In every scared child she met, she saw a little bit of herself, and she offered exactly what Gabriel had offered her years ago: presence, listening, compassion. Today, decades after that encounter at the airport, the story of Gabriel and Julia is told as an example that transformation is possible, that a single act of kindness can create ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. The Fresh Start Foundation now operates in 15 states, has helped over 10,000 children, and has inspired dozens of other similar organizations. The name Gabriel Hayes is remembered not as a successful businessman, but as a man who chose love over indifference, and Julia, now a mature woman, continues her tireless work. Every child she helps is a tribute to the man who stopped for her when no one else did. Every life saved is an extension of the hug she received in an airport years ago from a stranger who became her father, because in the end, that's what life is about stopping when everyone else is rushing by, about listening when everyone else is making noise, about staying when it would be easier to leave, and about transforming our own pain into compassion for others. The story began with a chance encounter in a busy airport, but it became something much bigger, a story of redemption, of healing, of unconditional love, proof that sometimes all it takes is for one person to decide to stop and listen for an entire life to change direction. And that change, started by Gabriel and Julia, continues to spread, touching new lives every day, proving that the most important legacy we can leave is not measured in money or professional achievements, but in the lives we touch, the hearts we warm, the hope we plant in wounded souls. Because that's exactly what happened that day at the airport. A man stopped, and by stopping, he not only saved one life, but he started a movement of compassion that continues to save lives to this day. And maybe that's the true meaning of it all, that when we choose love over indifference, when we choose to stay instead of passing by, we are planting seeds of transformation that will blossom far beyond what our eyes can ever see. End of story. Hey everyone, we hope the story of Gabriel and Julia touched your heart deeply. If you were moved by this journey of love, redemption, and compassion, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Every day, we bring you intense and transformative stories like this one, revealing the deepest and most beautiful side of the human soul. Stories that remind us of the importance of stopping, of listening, of extending a hand to those in need. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on the true meaning of family and unconditional love.